The courtroom was filled with quiet murmurs as a teenager stepped through the heavy wooden doors, clutching a folder to his chest. His shoes squeaked awkwardly against the polished floor, drawing a few snickers from the benches. The judge glanced up, eyebrows raised, and offered a dismissive smile, as if this was some kind of prank. A kid? In a real courtroom? Laughter quietly spread as the teen took his place at the defense table. No one expected much, just another strange day in court. But as the gavel struck and the boy rose to speak, what followed would silence every voice in that room. What they saw was a boy. What they were about to hear was something far beyond what anyone imagined. Alex had always been different. While other kids his age were engrossed in video games or hanging out with friends, Alex found solace in the quiet corners of libraries, buried in books that most teenagers wouldn't dare to open. His interests weren't born out of mere curiosity or a desire to be different. They were fueled by a deep-seated desperation that had taken root 2 years prior. It all began when his older brother, Marcus, was arrested for a crime he didn't commit. The news had shattered their family. Marcus, who had always been Alex's protector and role model, was suddenly portrayed as a criminal. The justice system, overwhelmed and indifferent, treated Marcus's case as just another file in an endless stack. Public defenders were overworked, and private attorneys demanded fees that their family could never afford. Each meeting with a lawyer ended in disappointment, and the hope that once glimmered in their mother's eyes began to fade. Alex watched helplessly as his mother broke down night after night, her strength eroding with each passing day. The weight of their circumstances pressed heavily on his young shoulders. He couldn't stand by and watch his family crumble. If no one else would fight for Marcus, he decided, then he would. With a determination that belied his age, Alex embarked on a journey of self-education. He started by reading introductory books on law, gradually progressing to more complex materials, like case studies and constitutional theory. He spent countless hours poring over court transcripts, analyzing legal precedents, and understanding the intricacies of the justice system. His room transformed into a makeshift law library, with stacks of books and notes covering every surface. Alex's days were meticulously planned. He attended school like any other teenager, but his evenings were dedicated to his studies. He created a rigorous schedule, allocating time for reading, note-taking, and mock trials that he conducted in front of a mirror. He even reached out to online forums and communities, engaging in discussions and seeking advice from legal enthusiasts and professionals. Despite the challenges, Alex remained steadfast. There were moments of doubt, times when the material seemed insurmountable, and the weight of his mission felt too heavy. But the thought of his brother, languishing in a cell for a crime he didn't commit, reignited his resolve. He reminded himself that this wasn't just about acquiring knowledge. It was about justice, about righting a wrong that had torn his family apart. Over the course of 2 years, Alex's understanding of the law deepened. He became adept at identifying flaws in arguments, recognizing inconsistencies in testimonies, and constructing compelling defenses. He practiced public speaking, honed his analytical skills, and developed a keen sense of strategy. His transformation was nothing short of remarkable. When the day of Marcus's trial arrived, Alex was ready. He approached the courtroom not as a teenager seeking attention, but as a determined advocate for his brother. The judge and the opposing counsel were skeptical, their expressions laced with amusement and disbelief. But Alex remained undeterred. He presented his case with clarity and confidence, systematically dismantling the prosecution's arguments and highlighting the inconsistencies in their evidence. As he spoke, the courtroom's atmosphere shifted. The initial laughter and whispers gave way to attentive silence. The judge leaned forward, intrigued by the young man's poise and command of the law. By the time Alex concluded his defense, it was clear that he had not only challenged the prosecution's case but had also redefined the court's perception of him. The verdict was a resounding not guilty. Marcus was acquitted, and the courtroom erupted in applause. The judge commended Alex for his dedication and intellect, acknowledging that he had witnessed something extraordinary. Alex's journey was a testament to the power of determination, the importance of self-belief, and the impact one individual can have in the face of adversity. His story serves as an inspiration, reminding us that with passion and perseverance, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome. When the long-dreaded court day finally arrived, The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. The courtroom was filled with skeptical onlookers, reporters who smelled scandal, and townspeople eager to witness what they assumed would be a spectacle. An overconfident teenager foolishly attempting to play lawyer in a serious felony trial. As Alex walked into the courtroom, his heart pounding but his steps steady, he felt the weight of every eye fixed on him. He wore a plain navy suit borrowed from a neighbor, a few sizes too big, but he carried himself with an air of quiet determination. The bailiff announced the case, and when the judge entered, everyone rose in unison. Judge Ronald Whitaker, a stern and seasoned man known for his no-nonsense demeanor, took one look at Alex and sighed audibly, already half annoyed. "You must be joking," the judge muttered, glancing down at the file in front of him. When Alex respectfully asked for permission to speak on behalf of his brother, Marcus, the courtroom erupted in whispers and stifled laughter. The prosecutor leaned back smugly, lips curling into a smirk, and the judge raised a brow in disbelief. "Do you even know what jurisdiction means?" Judge Whitaker scoffed, clearly enjoying the sarcasm, expecting Alex to flinch or fumble. But Alex didn't blink. With calm resolve, he opened a well-worn legal binder he had assembled himself and referenced a rarely invoked clause in the state's legal code, a procedural relic that allowed a direct family member to assist in defense under extraordinary circumstances, provided they could demonstrate sufficient legal knowledge, and no objections were raised by the defendant or his attorney. The court fell silent. The prosecutor's grin faltered, and the judge leaned forward slightly, intrigued despite himself. He flipped through his own legal handbook and, after a long pause and a sigh that seemed to surrender to the absurdity of the moment, nodded reluctantly. "Very well," he said. "You'll be allowed to assist. But know this, if you misstep even once, I'll have you removed from the courtroom." Alex nodded respectfully, then turned to his brother, who sat handcuffed and pale, stunned by what his younger sibling was about to attempt. As the trial began, the prosecution wasted no time. They were aggressive and cocky, armed with what they believed to be airtight evidence, camera footage, witness statements, forensic reports, and a motive built around Marcus's alleged grudge against a former employer. They painted him as violent, bitter, and impulsive. The lead prosecutor, Mr. Harlan, delivered his opening argument with flair, gesturing dramatically and tossing around phrases like slam dunk and clear cut. The jury listened, occasionally nodding, clearly influenced by the confidence with which the state presented its case. Alex, meanwhile, took notes silently, his face unreadable. When it was his turn, he stood up slowly and introduced himself, not with bravado, but with sincerity. He explained without emotion that he wasn't a licensed attorney, just a brother fighting for justice because no one else had. There were a few scoffs in the gallery, and even one juror rolled her eyes. But Alex wasn't there for applause. He laid out his defense plan with precise language and a deep understanding of legal procedure. He didn't tell stories or play for sympathy. He outlined timelines, introduced inconsistencies in the prosecution's narrative, and emphasized the importance of truth over theatrics. The first challenge came quickly. A forensic witness presented DNA evidence tying Marcus to the crime scene, but Alex, having studied the case for months, asked for the lab's chain of custody records and pointed out that the sample had been stored improperly for 12 hours against protocol before being processed. The expert stumbled through his response, and though he didn't fully concede, the doubt had been planted. Still, the jury seemed uncertain. Alex knew that factual precision alone wouldn't win the case. He needed to break the emotional grip the prosecution had created. One by one, Alex began calling witnesses, starting with the so-called eyewitness, who claimed to have seen Marcus near the scene on the night of the incident. Alex pulled up surveillance footage from a nearby gas station, showing Marcus purchasing snacks at a time that directly contradicted the witness's statement. He cross-examined the man carefully, methodically dismantling his timeline until the witness admitted he might have been mistaken. The gallery fell quiet again, but the court remained unconvinced. People didn't want to believe a teenager could dismantle an adult prosecution team. The pressure mounted with every passing hour, and Alex could feel it in his bones. The prosecutor started making jokes between breaks. audibly referring to Alex as the boy genius in a mocking tone. Even the judge looked ready to pull the plug more than once, frustrated by the unconventionality of it all. And yet Alex stayed focused. He studied jury reactions. He noted when they looked confused or bored. He adapted on the fly, switching his tone from academic to conversational. He began telling stories that humanized his brother, anecdotes of Marcus tutoring kids, volunteering for food drives, and taking care of Alex after their father died. Slowly, the jury's eyes softened. The icy skepticism that had greeted him at the start was beginning to thaw. Then came the turning point. Alex introduced a piece of evidence that had been overlooked by the original public defender, a phone log showing Marcus receiving a call from their mother at the exact moment the crime allegedly occurred. It placed Marcus not just away from the scene, but actively talking on the phone across town. The log had been buried in discovery and dismissed as irrelevant. Alex explained the implications clearly, and then, dramatically, he played a voicemail his mother had left at that exact time, her voice cheerful and unknowing. "You better pick up, Marcus. I'm making your favorite for dinner." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. The timestamp was irrefutable. It destroyed the prosecution's timeline in one stroke. The prosecutor objected, but the judge overruled him. Alex had laid the foundation legally, introduced the evidence properly, and proven his point without a single procedural error. Even Judge Whitaker's eyes widened with reluctant respect. From that moment on, the tone of the trial changed. Witnesses grew nervous. Jurors leaned in closer. The gallery stopped whispering and began watching intently. Alex's confidence grew, not into arrogance, but into certainty. He cited case law with ease, referenced precedent, and even corrected the prosecutor on a procedural matter, earning a sharp glare from Mr. Harlan and a chuckle from the court reporter. The final blow came during closing arguments. The prosecutor tried to reframe the narrative, casting doubt on the phone log, and arguing that Marcus could have still committed the crime. But Alex, in his closing, did something remarkable. He spoke not just to the jury's minds, but to their hearts. He began by reminding them that justice wasn't about pride or protocol. It was about truth. He didn't ask for sympathy. He asked for scrutiny. He told them to examine the facts, question everything, and to think not like spectators but like protectors of the law. He described his brother not as a perfect man, but as an innocent one. He reminded them that mistakes in judgment don't make people criminals, and that jumping to conclusions destroys lives. His voice cracked once, but only once, and that raw moment of vulnerability resonated, more powerfully than any legal citation could. "I'm just a kid," Alex said finally, "but even I can see when something is wrong. And if I can see it, so can you." The room was silent as he sat down. The jury deliberated for 2 tense hours. Alex waited, barely breathing. His mother clutched his hand the entire time, trembling. When the foreman stood and read the verdict, not guilty, a gasp spread through the courtroom like a wave. Some people cheered, some cried. Marcus broke down in tears and hugged his brother tightly, whispering over and over, "You saved me! You saved me!" Judge Whitaker removed his glasses and looked at Alex for a long moment before saying, "In my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen anything like this. This court owes you respect, young man." News outlets picked up the story within hours. "Teen genius outsmarts entire courtroom," the headlines read. Interviews were requested, scholarships were offered, and law schools began sending him letters before he'd even finished high school. But none of that mattered to Alex. He didn't care about fame or recognition. All he wanted was his brother free, his family whole again. As the courtroom emptied and the cameras flashed, Alex stood silently, clutching the same binder he'd carried in with him. Not for show, not for pride, but as a symbol of what's possible when love, knowledge, and justice collide. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs and skeptical glances. As Alex rose from his seat, clutching a stack of neatly organized notes in trembling but determined hands, his eyes fixed on the judge as he requested permission to cross-examine the key witness, a bold move for anyone, but especially for a teenager, representing his wrongly accused older brother in a courtroom that had dismissed him from the start. The judge, who had until then entertained Alex's participation as a mild novelty, raised an eyebrow in half-curious doubt. exchanging a glance with the seasoned prosecutor who barely hid his smirk, expecting the boy to collapse under the weight of pressure and protocol. But as Alex approached the witness stand, the air shifted. The gallery quieted, as if sensing something rare and unpredictable was about to unfold. Standing no taller than the lectern itself, Alex began, not with a nervous stammer or emotional outburst, but with a calm, calculated tone, laying the foundation of his strategy with a confidence far beyond his years. He asked the witness, a man named Dennis Hall, who claimed to have seen Marcus near the scene of the crime, to recount his testimony once more. Hall, clearly rehearsed, gave the same account he had delivered twice before, but Alex had studied this man, memorized his words, mannerisms, and most importantly, the holes in his story. You say you saw my brother at the corner of 5th and Lincoln at 8:47 p.m., Alex said, flipping open a folder with precise intent. But were you aware that at 8:45 p.m., security footage from the parking garage, across town captured, you entering the building with your key card? A collective gasp rose from the courtroom. The footage appeared on the monitor, time-stamped, undeniable. Hall stammered. The smirk on the prosecutor's face vanished. Alex continued, not relenting, not raising his voice, but growing sharper with each question. He produced the keycard logs, which he had obtained through a Freedom of Information request 2 weeks prior, showing that Hall could not have left the parking garage, walked 3 blocks and still seen Marcus where he claimed. Then Alex brought out cell phone tower pings, showing Marcus's phone on a call with their mother, located far from the crime scene at the exact time of the alleged sighting. Hall's narrative unraveled thread by thread, and Alex pulled each one with surgical precision. So which is it, Mr. Hall? He asked, his tone still respectful but unmistakably firm. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? The gallery fell into a deep silence. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, no longer resting lazily on his bench, but watching with a new intensity, as if seeing Alex for the first time not as a boy, but as a rising force in the courtroom. Alex didn't stop there. He flipped open another folder and revealed inconsistencies in the police report, suggesting the detective who filed it had relied solely on Hall's initial statement without verifying timestamps, calling into question the entire timeline of the prosecution's case. The prosecutor tried to object, claiming irrelevance, but the judge waved him down, visibly intrigued by the accuracy and depth of the questioning. "Proceed," the judge said, leaning back, his expression now unreadable. Alex returned his focus to Hall and asked one final question. "Why did you tell the police you saw Marcus? When the evidence shows you couldn't have been there?" Hall froze, his face flushing with panic. I was just trying to help," he mumbled. But no one in the room believed him anymore. The damage had been done. When Alex turned to face the court, his voice lowered but rang clearly through the tense air. "My brother didn't do this. The evidence doesn't lie, but people do. And if you really listen, it's telling you the truth right now." No one moved. No one breathed. The transformation was complete, not just in how the court saw the witness, but in how they now saw Alex. The smirks were gone, the sneers erased. In their place was a stunned silence, broken only by the quiet scribbling of a juror, taking notes for the first time in hours. The prosecutor, visibly shaken, requested a recess, needing time to reassess a case that had just been gutted by a boy who wasn't even old enough to vote. During the break, whispers filled the halls about the teenage defender, about the video, the cell tower pings, the keycard logs. Reporters who had once gathered for ridicule were now drafting headlines of courtroom genius, calling it the moment the trial turned. The judge behind chambers reviewed the footage again, this time not to discredit it, but to verify just how thoroughly the foundation of the case had been cracked open. Back in the courtroom, Alex sat beside his brother, Marcus, who looked at him with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Where did you learn to do that?" he whispered. "Late nights," Alex replied softly, "when I couldn't sleep thinking about losing you." As the trial resumed, the prosecution stumbled through the rest of their witnesses, their case now full of holes and inconsistencies that Alex highlighted with the same calm, relentless logic. The detective who filed the report fumbled when Alex asked him why the phone logs had been ignored. Another witness admitted to being unsure about what they saw. Bit by bit, Alex dismantled the narrative the state had so confidently presented. The jury watched wide-eyed, as this boy who was supposed to be in school gave a masterclass in cross-examination, each point landing with weight and purpose. During closing arguments, the prosecutor tried to regain control, suggesting that while Alex had raised interesting questions, they didn't erase the motive. Marcus had a reason to be angry, he said. He had an argument with the victim weeks before the incident. But Alex responded not with denial, but with clarity. Being angry is not a crime, he said. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time isn't either. But being falsely accused? That's the real injustice here. He reminded the jury of every inconsistency, every contradiction, every fact that had been ignored until he brought it forward, not to confuse them, but to illuminate the truth. "I'm not asking you to believe in me," he said in his final words. "I'm asking you to believe in the evidence, to believe in the facts, and to give my brother the justice the system tried to deny him." When he sat down, even the judge took a long breath, visibly moved. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice trembled slightly as he read the verdict. "Not guilty." Gasps, followed by cheers, erupted from the gallery. Marcus dropped his head into his hands and sobbed. And Alex, after holding it together for so long, finally let a tear roll down his cheek. The judge called for order, then looked directly at Alex. "Young man," he said slowly, "I've presided over thousands of cases, and I have never seen someone of your age, or frankly any age, prepare and execute a defense with such precision, composure, and integrity." He removed his glasses and set them down. "You've not only defended your brother, you've defended the very idea that truth matters more than titles, more than age, more than ego." Cameras flashed as Alex and Marcus embraced. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions, calling him a prodigy, a future Supreme Court justice. But Alex only cared about one thing: his brother's freedom. He walked Marcus through the courthouse doors into the sunlight as a free man. His binder of evidence still clutched under his arm, not as a symbol of victory, but as proof that persistence, preparation, and love could take down even the most impossible odds. That night, as the story aired on national news, people across the country watched a teenager stand up against an entire justice system and win, not with flash or arrogance, but with truth and an unshakable belief that one voice, armed with knowledge, can change everything. And somewhere, in bedrooms and living rooms and quiet corners of the world, other young minds watched and whispered to themselves, "If he can do it, maybe I can too." The silence that had briefly settled over the courtroom after the verdict was broken not by applause, not by cheers, but by the stunned, breathless murmurs of those who had witnessed something far beyond legal procedure, a transformation, a revelation, a moment that redefined everything they thought they knew about justice, youth, and courage. As the gavel echoed and the judge prepared to conclude the session, he paused, eyes narrowing slightly as he looked directly at the boy standing at the defense table. Not with dismissal this time, but with the hesitant awe one reserves for something truly unprecedented. "One question," the judge said slowly, his voice not demanding but sincere, colored by something rare, respect. "Who taught you to do this?" The courtroom shifted again, attention focusing like a beam onto Alex, who stood quietly, binder still clutched to his chest, his brother's acquittal still hanging, fresh in the air like the final note of a haunting melody. He didn't hesitate, didn't glance at anyone for validation. "No one," he said. "I taught myself. Every night, every morning, every weekend." He looked at the judge not defiantly, but with truth shining behind his eyes. "I didn't do this to prove a point. I did it because I had no choice." The words rippled through the gallery, through the reporters seated at the back who were already typing headlines, through the jurors who now looked at him not as a participant but a prodigy. For a long moment, no one moved. The judge leaned back slowly, lips parted as if trying to find something suitable to say, but finding only awe in its place. Opposing counsel, who had earlier scoffed at the idea of a teenager questioning his evidence, was now gathering his documents with hands that trembled slightly, the cracks in his confidence fully exposed. A request for recess was muttered almost reflexively, but it didn't matter now because, What had just unfolded in that room could not be paused or undone. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about Alex. This boy, this self-taught, relentless, emotionally grounded genius had not simply won a case. He had changed the room. People in the back row who had attended out of curiosity now rose from their seats, as if standing might help them process what they had witnessed. Reporters began recording as Alex stepped away from the defense table and walked toward Marcus. Not for the cameras, but for his brother, who still sat stunned, as if afraid to breathe in case it had all been a dream. "You did it," Marcus whispered, voice cracking. Alex nodded, unshed tears forming in his eyes but not falling. "No, we did." As they embraced, a woman from the gallery approached the railing, an older woman, neatly dressed, eyes wide with admiration. "Son," she said, "where did you even begin to learn all this?" Alex turned, offered a humble shrug. "Libraries, online forums, court transcripts, anything I could get my hands on." His voice was steady, but his hands, now released from the pressure of performance, began to tremble. Behind him, the judge still sat at his bench, motionless, as if frozen between admiration and responsibility, torn between protocol and a growing need to acknowledge the brilliance he had witnessed. After a long pause, he removed his glasses and placed them gently on the bench. "Mr. Alex," he said, emphasizing the Mr. with subtle reverence, "Oh, you are not merely gifted. You are a student of justice in its purest form. It is rare, no, extraordinary, to witness someone pursue truth not for gain, not for prestige, but because they had to, because they believed in it." He stood, something judges rarely did post-verdict. "Your presence in this courtroom has reminded us all why the law matters, and why those who challenge it with reason, compassion, and truth must be heard, even if they don't have a degree, a title, or years of experience." Alex's face turned red, overwhelmed, not from pride, but from the sudden attention. The magnitude of words spoken in a chamber that had, hours before, barely acknowledged his right to be there. Reporters surged forward as court officers scrambled to manage the crowd. Questions were shouted. Microphones extended. "Alex, how old are you? Are you planning to become a lawyer? Will you press charges for the false accusation? What does this say about the justice system?" But Alex, never one for theatrics, looked down at his brother and simply said, "Let's go home." They stepped outside into blinding light. The courthouse doors closed behind them with a heavy echo, and the world beyond had already changed. People on the steps clapped, a wave of spontaneous support from strangers, moved by what they had seen or heard about in viral posts, already making the rounds online. Social media buzzed, teen wins court case alone, genius in the courtroom. Real-life legal prodigy saves brother. The story was out, and it moved like lightning. Within hours, news segments aired clips of the trial, blurred faces of jurors who had since spoken about the boy, who argued like a trained defense attorney, who exposed corruption, who challenged authority not with rebellion, but with logic. Legal professionals commented online with admiration and concern. "How did the system not see this?" one defense attorney tweeted. "The boy should be in Harvard, not high school." But while the world speculated, Alex stayed silent. At home, he sat with Marcus in the backyard, away from flashing lights and ringing phones, as the sun dipped beneath the fence and painted the grass in gold. Marcus finally broke the silence. "You saved my life, man." Alex nodded slowly. "I didn't want to become someone new. I just didn't want to lose you." Marcus, still processing, asked, "When did you decide to do this?" Alex smiled faintly. "The day they arrested you." What followed in the days ahead was beyond anything Alex could have imagined. Offers poured in, law firms wanting to sponsor him, universities expressing interest despite his age, media companies asking for interviews, book deals, movie rights. But Alex declined most of it. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't interested in being turned into a spectacle. What he wanted, had always wanted, was justice, peace, clarity. Yet the story couldn't be contained. A week later, the judge from the case wrote a formal letter of recommendation to the National Legal Scholars Guild, suggesting Alex be granted honorary admission to a pre-law mentorship program. "His age should not limit the value of his mind," the letter read. "He has proven himself in a space where even seasoned lawyers stumble. That deserves more than applause. It deserves investment. Law professors across the country weighed in, debating the implications. What does it mean when a teenager performs better than a licensed attorney? One said. It means our system is due for an evolution, another replied. But in the quiet of his bedroom, Alex returned to where it all started. The scattered books, the legal pads, the annotated court transcripts. He didn't want to stop learning. He didn't want this to be his peak. He wanted to become better. Not because people now expected it, but because he knew what it felt like to be powerless, to fight the impossible, and to win not through luck, but preparation. One night, he received a handwritten letter from a young girl whose brother had also been accused of a crime. You gave me hope, it said. If you could do it, maybe I can too. Alex folded the letter carefully, placed it in the same binder he'd used in court, the one now worn at the edges, filled with notes, truths, and pain. It was no longer just paper. It was proof that the system wasn't untouchable, that ordinary people could bend it toward justice. That age wasn't a barrier to brilliance. And as the world continued to echo with his story, Alex prepared for the future, not with arrogance, not for applause, but because somewhere out there, someone else would be wrongfully accused. Someone else would be silenced, and he wanted to be ready, not as a child prodigy, not as a courtroom novelty, but as someone who had faced the system untrained, unseen, underestimated, and revealed its cracks for all to see. The courtroom buzzed with the low hum of whispers, papers shuffling, and skeptical glances as Alex, just 17, stood quietly at the defendant's table, alone, dwarfed by the solemn weight of the room and the towering figure of the presiding judge, who had barely concealed his irritation at the very beginning of the trial. Is this a prank? The judge had muttered under his breath when he first saw the teenager walk in with an old leather binder in hand and no lawyer at his side. The prosecution chuckled, even smirking as he leaned toward the jury and gestured subtly at Alex's untucked shirt and nervous fingers. What none of them knew, what no one expected, was that behind Alex's soft-spoken demeanor was a razor-sharp mind honed, not in a law school classroom but in a cramped bedroom, filled with second-hand legal textbooks, case transcripts, and relentless late-night study sessions lit by a flickering desk lamp. This wasn't a case he had volunteered to take. This was survival. His older brother Marcus had been accused of a robbery he didn't commit, arrested without warning, and thrown into a system that had already decided his guilt. They had no money for a lawyer, no connections, no power, just Alex, who decided from the moment his brother was taken away that he would do whatever it took to fight for the truth. Every moment in court was a test, every question a battle. At first, the judge openly mocked him, correcting his terminology, sighing audibly at his motions, occasionally looking at the ceiling in disbelief, whenever Alex challenged a procedural flaw. But Alex didn't flinch. He simply learned, adapted, returned every day more prepared. The courtroom slowly began to shift, not all at once, but in moments. When Alex cross-examined the police officer who had arrested Marcus and exposed that the timeline of the arrest contradicted the official report, people leaned forward. When he presented security footage from a nearby cafe that placed Marcus blocks away from the crime scene, even the jury began to murmur. Still, the judge remained stone-faced until the moment Alex presented his final piece of evidence, a phone record, traced and verified, that placed Marcus on a call with their mother during the robbery. The room fell silent. The prosecution tried to object, but Alex cited precedent, case law he had memorized, and the objection was overruled. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. It was the first visible crack in his condescension. For the first time, the weight of Alex's work could not be dismissed. Day after day, the trial unfolded like a chess match. Opposing counsel grew increasingly defensive, scrambling to reframe the narrative, but Alex had built a wall of truth around his brother's innocence. Brick by brick, slowly, respect began to rise like heat off the courtroom floor. Reporters who had shown up expecting a train wreck now scribbled headlines about a boy genius taking on the justice system. A local news crew came to record a few minutes of the hearing, and what they captured went viral overnight. A clip of Alex calmly dismantling a witness's testimony with nothing but logic, empathy, and facts. "Isn't it true?" he had said, voice unwavering. "That you never actually saw my brother's face that night?" The witness had faltered, then stammered, I guess not directly." The judge blinked. The gallery gasped. Even the bailiff's expression softened. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Teenagers weren't supposed to out-argue professionals. But Alex wasn't ordinary. He wasn't arrogant either, just driven, focused, relentless. He had learned the law not as an academic pursuit, but as a weapon of necessity. And with every passing day, the courtroom transformed. The judge no longer interrupted him with mocking corrections. Instead, he listened, leaned in, studied him. The prosecution stopped underestimating him and began whispering urgently between themselves. And Marcus, once slumped in defeat, began to sit taller, hope returning to his eyes. Then came the final day. The courtroom was packed. Strangers stood at the back. Journalists lined the walls. Even students from the nearby law school came to witness the final arguments. Alex stood, binder in hand, breathing slowly. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "you've been told that my brother is a criminal. But what you've really seen is a failure, not of him, but of a system that doesn't care how old, poor, or unheard someone is. Today, I'm not asking you to believe in me. I'm asking you to believe in truth." His voice didn't tremble. It rang out with sincerity and strength. The jury listened. The gallery remained silent. Even the judge watched him with a look that no longer held judgment, but curiosity. The deliberation took hours. People waited in anxious groups outside the courtroom, whispering about the boy who might have just saved his brother's life. And then, finally, the jury returned. 12 faces held emotion close, but their verdict spoke louder than anything. Not guilty. A collective gasp filled the room. Alex's mother collapsed into sobs. Marcus clutched the edge of the table, blinking back tears. The judge stood, not in haste, but with deliberate purpose. He descended from the bench, something rarely done, and walked directly toward Alex. Silence reigned. "I owe you an apology," he said, extending his hand. "Not just for underestimating you, but for failing to see what justice truly looks like. You reminded us." His voice, often cold and procedural, was now warm. "You have a gift and a calling." The room erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. The gallery rose to their feet. Even the prosecution nodded respectfully. But Alex didn't cry. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded, exhaustion in his eyes, but fulfillment in his chest. In that moment, he wasn't just the kid no one believed in. He was the reason justice had a second chance. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. The clip of the judge shaking Alex's hand became a global symbol of defiance, hope, and brilliance. Offers poured in from law firms, scholarships, interviews, foundations wanting to fund his education. But Alex turned off his phone. He wasn't doing this for recognition. That night, as the stars rose over their small home, Alex sat on the porch with Marcus, the cool air finally feeling like relief instead of pressure. "You did it," Marcus whispered. Alex shrugged. "We did it." And for the first time in what felt like years, they laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they were free. Free of the weight, the fear, the silence. In the weeks that followed, Alex continued to study, not to impress the world, but because he knew more battles like this would come. More innocent people would be accused. More power would be abused. And somewhere in a courtroom not far away, the next fight for truth would begin. And when it did, he'd be ready. Not just as a teenager in disguise, but as the mind that forced the system to see him and believe. In a packed courtroom buzzing with skepticism, a 17-year-old named Alex stood alone, facing not just a legal battle, but a wall of judgment. With no lawyer beside him and no suit to hide behind, the judge mocked his presence, the prosecution sneered, and the gallery waited for him to fail. But Alex wasn't there to impress. He was there to fight for his wrongly accused brother, Marcus. Armed only with determination and months of self-taught legal knowledge, Alex dismantled the case piece by piece, exposing lies, revealing evidence, and challenging seasoned professionals with calm logic and relentless heart. Slowly, the courtroom transformed. The judge's mockery turned into respect. The jury leaned in, captivated. The crowd fell silent as the boy they had dismissed became the voice of truth. When the verdict came, not guilty, the courtroom erupted. Not in chaos, but in awe. The judge stepped down, shook Alex's hand, and admitted he had misjudged him. But Alex didn't smile for cameras or soak in the praise. He had done what he came to do, prove that belief, purpose, and courage could shake even the coldest systems. This wasn't a story about law. It was a story about standing tall when the world laughs, about believing in yourself when no one else does. In that courtroom, Alex didn't just win a case. He reminded us all that greatness often comes from the most unexpected places.